My name is Graham Ellsworth. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a university researcher in Chicago, specializing in behavioral psychology. My salary of $85,000 a year isn't extravagant, but it's steady enough to keep me comfortable in a modest one-bedroom apartment near Northwestern. For the past 5 years, I believe I was in a stable, committed relationship with Lydia Harcourt, a 30-year-old marketing coordinator earning around $60,000 at a mid-sized firm downtown. We've been engaged for nearly 3 years, with our wedding planned for September 2024, and everything seemed perfectly in order, at least on the surface. Our lives had a rhythm. Weekends were spent walking through open houses, imagining the kind of place we'd buy together after the wedding. She lived with 2 roommates in Lincoln Park, splitting rent 3 ways, while my own apartment cost me $1,900 a month, but kept me close to campus. The plan was straightforward. She'd move in with me after the wedding, and then we'd look for something bigger once we'd settled into married life. It felt like a life steadily moving forward, like stepping stones we only had to follow. If you're drawn to stories filled with cold-blooded revenge and shocking twists, make sure to like this video and subscribe, because new, intense stories appear here daily. In early June 2024, Lydia had planned a 3-week trip to Europe with her closest college friends, Sarah, Jessica, and Amanda, the same group she traveled with twice before while we were together. I had no issue with it. In fact, I encouraged her to go after the stress of wedding planning. I thought she deserved a break with her friends before we began this new chapter of our lives. The night before she left, we had dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant on Rush Street. She seemed happy, excited even, pulling out her phone to show me the itinerary. Paris, Barcelona, Rome, Amsterdam, a whirlwind European tour. She spoke animatedly about the museums she hoped to see and the restaurants Sarah had researched. Nothing felt unusual, nothing at all to suggest what was about to happen. What I didn't realize then was that she had already begun pulling away in silence, creating distance not with words but with subtle digital moves, adjusting privacy settings, planning her escape while smiling across the table at me. The next morning, I drove her to O'Hare. The airport buzzed with summer travelers, families juggling bags, announcements echoing across the terminal. We found her friends at check-in, all brimming with excitement. Lydia's hand was warm in mine as we double-checked her passport and travel details. It felt like any other couple's routine farewell, until it wasn't, just as we reached the security checkpoint. She stopped walking. The crowd swirled around us, but she stood frozen, staring at the floor. "Graham," she said quietly, not looking me in the eye, "I think we need to take a break." At first, I thought I misheard her. The noise around us was overwhelming. But when I asked her to repeat herself, she looked up and I saw it, the rehearsed steadiness in her eyes. This wasn't spontaneous. She told me she needed space, time to think, to figure things out. Her friends were already past security, calling for her to hurry, impatience clear in Sarah's gestures. My voice was calm, but inside my mind was spinning. "Lydia, we're getting married in 3 months. What exactly needs figuring out?" She only shrugged, as if brushing off dinner plans rather than dismantling our future. Her words were clipped, her tone final. She said we'd talk when she returned, then grabbed her carry-on and disappeared through the line, swallowed up by the terminal. And just like that, she was gone, onto a plane bound for Paris, while I stood rooted in O'Hare, stunned, trying to make sense of what had just unraveled in the span of a few minutes. That afternoon, I tried calling her, but my calls went straight to voicemail. I texted, hoping for clarity, but nothing came. By evening, I discovered she blocked me, not just on her phone, but across every platform: WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. Within 24 hours, Lydia had effectively erased me from her digital existence. Meanwhile, she was in Europe with her friends, smiling for photos, sipping drinks in rooftop bars, while I was left staring at a wedding plan for September with deposits already paid and invitations already ordered. The first week was brutal, not out of heartbreak alone, but from the sheer confusion. In psychology, behavior usually follows patterns, but Lydia's complete cutoff felt calculated, deliberate, almost clinical in its execution. By the 3rd day, I made my first decisive move. I called the Chicago History Museum, where we'd booked a venue, and explained what had happened. Mrs. Patterson, the events coordinator, surprised me with her kindness, assuring me that cancellations like this weren't unusual. She even offered to hold a deposit for 90 days in case we reconciled. But I didn't hesitate. Please cancel everything, I told her, even when she reminded me it meant losing $3,000. One by one, I dismantled what had taken months to plan. The caterer, gone, along with $4,500. The photographer, $1,800. The florist, $1,200. The band, $4,000. Even Lydia's dress alterations, non-refundable, another $800 gone. By the time I was done, I'd lost nearly 15,000 deposits, though in a strange way, each canceled call lifted a weight. The hardest part was telling my parents in Springfield. My mother wept quietly over the phone, while my father, ever the pragmatist, asked if I wasn't being too rash. But I knew better. Dad, she blocked me on everything before boarding that plane. That's not someone who wants to work things out. He sighed, offering that maybe she just needed space. But to me, it wasn't about space or cold feet. It was about respect. Adults don't vanish when problems arise. By week 2, whispers started reaching me from mutual acquaintances. Jake Morrison, who worked with Lydia's roommate Amanda, told me he'd seen photos of them in Barcelona, Lydia laughing with new faces, drinks in hand. Tyler, who was dating Sarah, showed me screenshots from Instagram stories. Lydia dancing in Rome's clubs, her smile radiant, as if nothing in her life had ever been tethered to mine. Each new detail cut deeper, not because of jealousy, but because it revealed the truth I hadn't wanted to see. Lydia hadn't stumbled into doubt. She had walked into it willingly, leaving me behind without a backward glance. Beach photos from the French Riviera showed her smiling without a care in the world, leaning far too close to some Italian guy named Marco, her arm looped casually around him as if they'd known each other for years, while I was back in Chicago calling vendors and explaining why our September wedding was no longer happening. By the third week, something surfaced that shifted my emotions from hollow disappointment to a sharper, colder anger. My friend David, who taught sociology at Northwestern, sent me something his girlfriend Emma had stumbled upon. Emma was loosely connected to Jessica on social media, and Jessica, in her usual careless fashion, had accidentally posted a screenshot from their private group chat into a public story for just a few minutes before realizing and deleting it. But those few minutes were enough, because Emma captured the image and forwarded it to David, who then shared it with me. The messages were from Lydia, written while she was in Amsterdam, and what I read made my blood run cold. She was painting me as an overbearing fiancé who had pressured her relentlessly into marriage, claiming that I was controlling, and that she had only asked for a little space to breathe, but I had supposedly overreacted, impulsively canceling everything without even trying to talk it through. According to her version, I was a villain, the unreasonable partner, and she was the misunderstood victim. The most infuriating part was her declaration to her friends that she intended to graciously forgive me when she returned, suggesting we would probably still end up married, just with a smaller, more intimate wedding instead. I must have read those screenshots 3 times before finally setting my phone down and laughing. Not a happy laugh, but the kind of sharp, empty laugh that escapes when the absurdity of betrayal becomes too much to bear. The audacity was almost admirable, as if she had crafted a carefully edited narrative where she was a noble heroine, and I was the insecure antagonist. That was the moment I made my second major decision. I began documenting everything. Screenshots of her social media posts before she blocked me, receipts of every wedding cancellation, a detailed timeline beginning with her exact words at O'Hare, and phone records showing my block calls, all neatly organized into a folder on my computer simply labeled facts. Meticulous, precise, undeniable. The third decision came soon after. Lydia's belongings, which had slowly colonized my apartment over the past year, needed to go. Half my closet was filled with her dresses, my medicine cabinet crammed with her expensive skincare, my refrigerator stocked with her almond milk and overpriced organic yogurt. One Saturday, I methodically boxed it all up, 14 cardboard boxes stacked neatly in my living room, every single item handled carefully so she couldn't accuse me of pettiness or damage. Then I texted Amanda, her roommate, and told her she could pick up Lydia's things anytime. Amanda replied within an hour, suggesting I was being dramatic. But I shot back that adults who just need space don't vanish completely, block every form of contact, and reappear 6 weeks later as though nothing happened. The boxes would be in the lobby, I told her, and Miguel, the doorman, would handle the handoff. By week 4, I finally started sleeping through the night. By week 5, I booked myself a trip to a research conference in Seattle I'd been considering for months but kept postponing. By week 6, I signed up for a cooking class, something I'd always wanted to do but had never made time for. My life was beginning to reassemble itself piece by piece, not as the life of a man waiting for his fiancée's return, but as a man rediscovering who he was without her. I even called building management and had her removed from the approved visitor list, her key card access deactivated, her name erased from my emergency contacts at work. I rearranged my apartment, placing my desk back where it had been before making space for her vanity mirror. Everything about the place was mine again. Then, 3 days before her scheduled return, my phone buzzed with a WhatsApp message from an international number. Her, clearly borrowing someone else's phone or using a European SIM. "Graham, I've been trying to reach you. We need to talk when I get back. I'm ready to work things out." I stared at that message for a long time, the gall of it almost laughable. 6 weeks of silence, 6 weeks of erasure, and now she was ready to work things out as if I had simply been waiting like a loyal servant for her royal decree. I typed back a single sentence. "There's nothing to work out. I've moved on." Her response came instantly, sharp and incredulous. "What do you mean you've moved on?" I just needed time to think. My reply was just as quick. "You had 6 weeks to think. I used that time. 2. The wedding is canceled. Your things are with your roommate. We're done." She fired back, insisting I was being ridiculous, that we could simply reschedule, that she had realized it was nothing more than pre-wedding jitters, and that such cold feet were normal. Normal. She believed ghosting your fiancé across an ocean for a month and a half was normal. I put the phone down, powered it off, and went to bed. Tomorrow, Lydia will be back in Chicago, expecting to walk through O'Hare and step seamlessly back into the life we'd built. But the truth was simple and irreversible. That life no longer existed. But there wasn't going to be any resumption, no careful rebuilding of what had already been broken beyond repair. Instead, there was going to be a very different conversation than the one she had imagined. Lydia came back to Chicago on a humid Tuesday afternoon in late July 2024, and I know this because Miguel, the doorman in my building, called my office to let me know that a woman was in the lobby asking for me. She didn't have access anymore. Her name had been removed from the approved list weeks ago, so she couldn't get upstairs. She says she's your fiancé, Mr. Ellsworth. Should I let her up? Miguel asked cautiously. "No, Miguel, we're not engaged anymore. If she needs something, she can call me directly. Don't let her wait there." 20 minutes later, my phone lit up with her number, freshly unblocked. "Graham, what the hell?" Miguel wouldn't let me upstairs and then told me to leave. "This is ridiculous." Her voice struck me instantly. It sounded sharper, edged with entitlement and urgency, so different from the soft pleading I remembered, or maybe I was simply hearing her without the filter of love for the first time. "I told you we were done, Lydia. I meant it." She shot back angrily. "Over WhatsApp? You ended a 5-year relationship over WhatsApp while I was out country." The irony stung. She was the one who had ended things at O'Hare Airport, who had walked away and left me in silence for 6 weeks. "I just made it official," I reminded her. "I never said I wanted to end anything," she countered quickly. "I said we needed a break. There's a difference." But was there? Because from where I had been standing, abandoned in Chicago, while she posted pictures from European nightclubs with strangers, it looked a lot like the end. Her voice cracked into sobs then, but not the quiet tears of remorse. These were the dramatic, manipulative sobs I remember from arguments about trivial things, the kind meant to bend me, to soften my resolve. They had worked once, but not anymore. "Graham, please, can we just meet and talk?" I realized I handled things badly, but I was overwhelmed. The wedding, moving in together, All of it. I just needed space. I laughed bitterly. Space? You vanished for 6 weeks in Europe while I canceled our wedding. Got it. Her voice rose an octave, indignant. You canceled our wedding. I never told you to do that. My anger hardened. You didn't tell me anything, Lydia. That was the problem. We circled around the same arguments for 10 long minutes. Her insisting she only needed time, me reminding her she had made communication impossible, her claiming she was focusing on herself, me pointing out she'd seemed focused enough on dancing with strangers in bars. And then her voice shifted, brittle and paranoid. Who told you about the pictures? Has someone been spying on me? When you post photos on social media, Lydia, they're not private. Your friends are friends, and Chicago isn't that big. She snapped back. So you've been stalking my social media? That's creepy, Graham. There it was. The deflection, the pivot to make me the villain. I'd expected it, but it still amazed me how easily she reached for blame. I'm done with this conversation, I said coldly, and I'm done with us. Don't call me again. But of course she did. Over the next 3 days, my phone became a battlefield of constant calls from different numbers, her roommates, her coworkers, even her younger sister Rachel from Milwaukee, pleading with me to hear Lydia out. Rachel's voice was calm, but heavy with confusion. Graham, I don't understand. Lydia said you just disappeared, canceled everything, left her devastated. Rachel, I interrupted. Did she tell you she blocked me completely before leaving the country? That she cut off all contact for 6 weeks? Silence stretched on the line. She said you both agreed to take a break. I almost laughed. She announced it at the airport and then vanished. That's not mutual. That's abandonment. More silence. Then, quietly, Rachel said, she admits she handled it badly, but can't you at least meet her? No, Rachel. I can't, and I won't. By Thursday, it had escalated beyond phone calls. Lydia showed up crying in the psychology department lobby at my university until campus security escorted her out. She appeared at my gym, my grocery store, even drove 2 hours to Springfield to sit with my mother and plead her case. That was when I'd had enough. I created a group text with 10 key people, our families, her sister, her roommates, a few mutual friends, and I laid it out plainly. Lydia told me we needed a break on June 15th at O'Hare, blocked me on everything for 6 weeks, and while she was gone, I canceled our wedding. She had returned now, wanting to reconcile, but I was done. I sent it so no one could twist the truth anymore. The responses exploded almost immediately. My mother confused, Sarah accusing me of airing private business, Rachel defending her sister, everyone clamoring with opinions. But the message that changed everything came from Jessica, one of our mutual friends who had traveled with Lydia. She messaged me privately first. Graham, you should know the truth. Lydia spent the whole trip saying she was free, hooking up with guys in 3 different cities, bragging about how good the break felt. She only panicked when Sarah showed her your message. I asked Jessica to share it with the group, and minutes later she did. The silence that followed was shattering. No more calls, no more defenses, no more attempts to paint me as a villain. But Lydia wasn't finished. On Saturday morning, while I was at the gym, she used the one thing I'd forgotten, a physical key. When I came home, she was sitting on my couch with a handwritten letter in her lap, waiting as if nothing had changed. Miguel later apologized. She showed me the key and said you were expecting her. I should have called you first. It's okay, Miguel, I told him. But from now on, even with a key, no one comes up unless I say so. Inside, Lydia looked at me with tearful eyes. I wrote you this letter explaining everything, why I needed space, how much you mean to me, how we can start over. Her words sounded desperate, but her presence in my apartment without permission was louder than anything she could write. Lydia, give me the key and leave. Did you even see Jessica's message? Jessica was drunk half the time. She doesn't remember clearly. My voice was still now. I don't care what Jessica remembers. I care that you disappeared without explanation, then broke into my home expecting me to forget everything. She stood slowly, realization settling in, her face a mixture of anger and despair. You're really going to throw away 5 years over one mistake? I shook my head. I'm not throwing anything away. You did that at O'Hare." She handed me the key, lingered at the door, and with one final look said, "You know what, Graham? Maybe this is for the best." And then she was gone, leaving behind only the faint smell of her perfume and the heavy silence of an ending that had been decided long before that July afternoon. Maybe I dodged a bullet, I thought at first, but the truth was clearer and harsher. Any man who would humiliate his fiancée in a group text instead of working through problems like an adult isn't someone she want to marry anyway. And there it was, her final deflection, the last desperate attempt to rewrite history and cast herself as a victim. Watching her walk away, I felt a realization settle into me like a weight lifting off my chest. I hadn't dodged a bullet at all. I had dodged a nuclear bomb. The weeks that followed unfolded with a calmness I hadn't experienced in years, a quiet that felt like a gift after months of suffocating under wedding planning and Lydia's ever-changing moods. Suddenly, there were no more vendor meetings to dread, no arguments about flowers or seating charts, no exhausting need to measure every word and gesture, so as not to trigger another dramatic outburst. For the first time in 5 years, I could breathe, and I threw myself into my work with a focus that felt electric. That research project on behavioral patterns in crisis situations, the one I had neglected for months, suddenly pulled me in with renewed fascination. I dusted off a half-finished paper that had been gathering dust on my desk and sent it off to the Journal of Applied Psychology. I began collaborating with colleagues at other universities, relationships I had wanted to cultivate but never had the bandwidth for while my life revolved around Lydia's whims. In late August, I flew to Seattle for a conference, and it was there in a waterfront restaurant overlooking the shimmering sunset on Puget Sound that I reconnected with Dr. Patricia Williams from Stanford, an old acquaintance from graduate school. Over dinner, she told me about a joint research fellowship they were offering in partnership with their behavioral economics department. 2 years, a generous salary, abundant funding, and access to resources most researchers only dreamed of. "Sometimes a change of scenery is exactly what we need," she said, her eyes steady. 6 months earlier, I would have dismissed it outright. Our families, Lydia's career, our imagined life in Chicago. But sitting there in Seattle, unburdened for the first time in years, I realized I no longer had those chains. "Send me the details." I told her, "I'm interested." Back in Chicago, Lydia was struggling with the wreckage she had set in motion. David told me that Emma had heard whispers from the social media grapevine. Friends who had distanced themselves after Jessica's revelations, colleagues who were questioning her stories. Jake Morrison, who worked with her at the marketing firm, confided one evening over drinks that Lydia had tried to cast me as emotionally unavailable, claiming I had abandoned her. But once people saw screenshots of the group text and heard the full version of events, her narrative collapsed. "She even tried to say you were harassing her after breakup," Jake said, shaking his head. But then someone brought the airport and the blocking, and suddenly her story unraveled. Management told her to leave her personal drama at the door. I didn't take pleasure in her struggles, but there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that truth has a way of rising to the surface no matter how much someone tries to bury it. Then came September, the month we were supposed to be married, and instead of vows, I received a certified letter delivered to my apartment. 3 handwritten pages on expensive stationery. Lydia's final performance. The tone was softer, more reflective, laced with the appearance of sincerity. She admitted mistakes, acknowledged that blocking me had been immature, even confessed she should have communicated better. Yet even in contrition, she twisted the narrative, recasting herself as a woman crushed by societal pressure, trapped by expectations, needing to rediscover herself before she could truly commit. And at the end, she extended her hand again, suggesting we start over slowly as friends, building something stronger. I read it twice, then filed it away, not because I planned to respond, but because it was the clearest evidence of what had always been wrong, her refusal to take true responsibility. She could never simply say, "I hurt you." It always had to be, "I was a victim of circumstances." I never answered. 2 weeks later, I accepted Stanford's offer. The timing aligned perfectly. I could finish my fall semester at Northwestern and begin in California after New Year's. My parents supported me fully, though my mother fretted about the distance, while my father, practical as always, focused on the career benefits. "Son, This is exactly the kind of opportunity you've been working toward your whole life, he told me. Sometimes change feels forced, but that doesn't mean it isn't good. He was right. Moving west felt like walking into a future I hadn't dared to picture when I was bending myself around someone else's career and comfort. Now, for the first time, I could choose freely. During my last week in Chicago, I ran into Sarah at a Lincoln Park coffee shop. She hesitated, then walked over. "Graham, hi. How are you?" I smiled. "I'm good, Sarah. I'm moving to California next month for a new position." She managed to smile. "That's great. A fresh start." Then, with a nervous pause, she added, "I owe you an apology. Lydia told us it was mutual, that you'd agreed to a break. I didn't know she blocked you. That was so one-sided." I nodded. "I appreciate that, but honestly, it doesn't matter now. It all worked out." She looked down. She's been miserable. I think she regrets it all. I felt no anger, no longing, only a detached kindness. "I hope she figures it out," I said, and I meant it, but it was no longer my concern. When I boarded my flight to San Francisco in January 2025, I couldn't help but think of O'Hare 7 months earlier, of Lydia vanishing into the crowd with her dramatic proclamation. This time felt different. This time, I wasn't abandoned. I was choosing. I knew where I was going, why I was going, and what waited for me. Her European trip was supposed to help her find herself, but in truth, it had helped me find clarity. I realized what I needed was someone who faced problems instead of fleeing them, who communicated instead of disappearing, who took responsibility instead of twisting the narrative. Now, 8 months into my fellowship at Stanford, I'm happier than I've been in years. My research is flourishing. I've built friendships with colleagues who challenge and inspire me, and I've begun seeing someone who knows how to sit in the discomfort of hard conversations instead of booking international flights to escape them. At 35, I finally feel like I'm living the life I was meant for, free from eggshells, manipulation, and false narratives. People sometimes ask if I regret how I handled Lydia. The answer is simple: absolutely not. I gave her exactly what she asked for, a break. The only difference was that mine was permanent. In the end, Lydia taught me something invaluable. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I hadn't just dodged a bullet that day at O'Hare. I had escaped a lifetime of chaos, of emotional instability, of being held accountable for someone else's choices. And that, I've come to learn, is the sweetest kind of revenge. Not anger, not bitterness, but building a life so fulfilling, so much brighter than the one you almost settled for, that you can't imagine ever having chosen differently.